Hey everybody, welcome to episode 65 of the Go Get Outside podcast. This is your host, Jason Milligan. Welcome back. Welcome aboard. On today's show, we will be speaking with Jen Hopper. Previous listeners may recognize her from episode 55. She was part of the Caving Roundtable. She is one of those people who could probably appear on this show a dozen times, and we still wouldn't be able to cover her entire outdoor history and all of her separate stories. She is a caver, a climber, a canyoneer, a diver, an outdoor educator, part of the cave rescue team, and she has certifications in pretty much anything you can think of. And not only is she experienced in most everything outdoor related and capable of rescuing you from the deep recesses of a cave, but she is also the person to go to when you are in need of a goat rescue.
My name is Jen Hopper. I work at the University of California, Riverside, running the Outdoor Excursions program, which is the outdoor recreation part of the recreation department. Been doing this for 18 years, and I'm very passionate about it. Something that I've spent that many years of my life doing, nights, weekends, and then during the day too. So that's my main goal in life, is getting college students into the outdoors.
So you are the only person who ever sent me a resume, which I thought was amazing. Like every once in a while, some people will say, oh, I'm going to be on the show. Here's some points about me in case we want to talk about them. And you sent me a 4-page caving resume, and it is just chock full of stuff. It's got every certification you can think of. And you said, oh, and this is just my caving resume. Right. So do you have an even larger, like overall outdoor resume that you didn't send me that's 30 pages or something?
There are a whole bunch of international trips that, when I started thinking about the things that I've done that didn't make it to the resume, it's just a line. Here are some other places I've been.
So you do the reverse of padding a resume. Most people, granted this is a very different type of resume, most people put a resume together and they're like, pretend I have this experience. And you're like, there are too many. And I forgot about these, so I just put these in. So what that leads me to believe is, and you've said you've been doing this particular job for 18 years, it leads me to believe you've been doing the activities you do for quite a while. Were you doing these things when you were a child, or is this something you came into later in life?
I've always loved being outside. I grew up in South Carolina, and it was kind of a suburban/rural part of South Carolina. It was outside of Greenville, which when I was there, and I think still is about the same, a population of about 60,000. So pretty small area compared to where I live now, which is 360,000.
Which is right next to Los Angeles, which is multiple millions.
Right. So here I've become a much more urban citizen. Back then, it was before the time of cell phones, and so we would just, hey, Mom, Dad, we're going out to play. See you when it gets dark. And we'd go explore. So there were a lot of places in the neighborhood that were just woods or streams, and we would explore, and we just loved. My best friend Denise and I and my sister and her friends, we would all just be outside all the time. And then when I was 14 in high school, I joined an outing club and went on my first backpacking trip. It was right after I started high school, and it was to the mountains of North Carolina, and it was in, I believe, November. It had been 12 degrees the night before, and we went with one of the teachers, geology teacher, history teacher. It was me and one other girl and 7 boys. And I don't think that very many of us had backpacked before. It was my first time, and it was Julie's first time also. And we kind of became pretty close on that trip because we ended up getting left behind by all the boys and the teacher. We were too slow.
Do you want to call out this teacher's name?
Nope. I don't think he wants to be named. It was a long time ago. He had a 9-year-old son that he brought along, and he discovered partway through the morning that he had left the van lights on, and that wasn't going to work for the weekend. So he left his son with us and ran back to get the van lights. Meanwhile, Julie and I each had backpacks that weighed about the same as we did.
So this is before you learned about
we didn't know
about what to put,
anything.
what to bring, what not to bring.
We had canned food, but no can opener.
It was also probably external frame, heavier
External
packs, right?
frame packs.
This is pre-lighten up, ultralight movement, right?
Yes, and we had borrowed them from the high school. Small South Carolina high school didn't have any funding for anything like that. So they were backpacks from the Army in the 70s,
right.
early 80s. And they didn't have any padding on the waist belt or anything like that. Cotton hip belts. And they were just loaded with like 90 pounds of stuff. And it wasn't anything useful.
Right.
So,
but you might need it. You never know. You might need just in case.
And I had the wrong shoes. I had boat shoes on with really slick soles, and it had snowed recently. So the snow was
at least
melting.
you also had a 9-year-old to care for.
And there was a
at the same
9-year-old. So that when I fell face down in the stream and was completely coated in mud and had to change clothes, I got to do it next to a 9-year-old because there were blackberry brambles on either side of the trail, so you couldn't get off the trail to change. So we ended up, the teacher caught up with us and took his boy and went ahead to meet up with the other 14-year-olds. And Julie and I were left to our own devices. And then it got dark, and we didn't know where the group was, and we didn't have a map, and we didn't
I'm
know...
assuming it was an easy-to-follow trail, or no?
It was a relatively easy-to-follow trail, but we never did catch up with them. It got dark, and we thought, well, I guess we should camp now. And we didn't know anything about camping, so we set up our tent on a hill so that we could have our heads uphill since we didn't have pillows. And then we took out the stove to cook dinner, and Julie's dad had showed her how to use it, and she had promptly forgotten all the instructions about priming and pumping. So I had seen my dad put lighter fluid on to coals to start a fire in the grill. So I thought, well, why don't we dump out all the fuel onto this giant 3-foot diameter spongy log that had gotten snowed on, and then we'll try to start the log on fire. Of course, that didn't work. So then we put our freeze-dried food into cold water and sort of tried to get it to rehydrate, and that doesn't work.
Delicious.
We'd push the peas down with a spoon, and they'd pop back up to the surface again.
In heated water, it already is minimally delicious.
Takes a long time, yeah. So finally, we opened a can of Vienna sausage because that was the only thing that had a pop top, and all our other cans needed a can opener, which we hadn't brought. And we took one bite of this congealed, soggy hot dog stuff, and we thought that we can't do it. And so we threw it outside the tent door and zipped up the tent and tried to sleep. And all night, the sides of the tent were flapping and slapping, and, the sleeping bags were threadbare. You could feel both sides of the nylon. There was no padding in between. It was kind of all in lumps.
And I'm guessing, like, no sleeping pad or anything
no
like
sleeping
that, right?
pad, yeah. And it, it was cold. It was well below freezing. So we woke up in the morning, or we were still awake in the morning, and we tried to drink some water, and it was frozen solid. So we unzipped the tent. We were going to get out and kind of try to find the rest of the group, and there was a tree in front of the tent that hadn't been there the night before.
Wait, what?
Because our tent had slid downhill during the night with us in it.
And you never noticed. So it only slid slowly enough that it didn't wake you up.
Yeah,
okay, got you.
Yeah. And then we found that can of Vienna sausage, and it was licked clean on the inside.
Oh, nice.
So we had
you were
some
visited by
visitors.
something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we tried to put on the backpacks, and of course our hips were just purple and swollen and bruised. And we finished the trip and get back home. We were like, Mom, Dad, we survived.
And let me tell you about the negligence of the adult you allowed us to leave with.
Well, I think that came out in the story that they had to interpret, because I told my parents, we lived and we had to carry these heavy loads, and we didn't have anything to eat, and our water bottles froze, and I'm going to need some new hiking boots and a better backpack and a sleeping bag and a stove and all of these things. And I was really excited about it.
So you're one of those
people.
Somewhat rare people that goes into the situation, everything goes wrong, and you're like, I need to do this again, as opposed to being one of those people that gets scared off and thinks that's what it is, and so therefore never wants to do it again.
I think
you welcomed the suffering.
That set the basis of my personal philosophy for outdoor recreation for the rest of my life.
Negligence, suffering, and being ill-prepared. Those are the stalwarts of your
survival and type 2 fun. That's what I'm about.
So that's what got you into it, really.
That's
a
how I got
terrible
into
backpacking trip
Yep.
with bad supervision and no good planning.
And I lived. Hooray.
So where did you go from there? Did your parents go buy you better boots and a better pack?
I did get all of that stuff. I didn't do as much backpacking.
Did they let you go with that same teacher
No.
again?
No, I got back into it again in college, and I joined the outing club in college and went with people that had a little bit more experience and common sense.
People who didn't leave you in the woods to take care of their child while they go turn their lights off and then leave you in the woods to fend for yourself through the night.
It all worked out in the end.
Well, that's good. It's good that you met more experienced people than that. So in college, you joined the outing club, more backpacking. Did you branch out into other sports from there?
A little bit. Took a few years. At the end of college, I transferred from college in South Carolina, a small private college, to the University of Georgia. In doing that, I lost an opportunity to go to Costa Rica, Ecuador, and the Galapagos Islands that I had planned on doing at my first college. So I needed to find something to make up for that. And I found a 2.5-month-long field geology study program that I participated in, where we drove from the University of Georgia through the whole western United States for 2.5 months and learned about geology. We got credit for 3 classes. We had to study on the van, and we saw all kinds of amazing places. We got to dig fossil fish and find dinosaur bones and all kinds of things. And in doing that, I discovered that I really loved the West, and I wanted to try living in the West. And that's when I decided to apply for graduate schools that were only in the Western U.S.
And that was kind of by accident, you're saying. You were supposed to do another thing, that couldn't happen, so you settled for this other thing.
That's how life happens, right?
Yeah,
It's a series of little accidents.
Yeah, I like that, when somebody's like headed a certain direction and then some mishap or some unexpected thing then leads them down a totally different direction. So so that happened to you, and then you decided the West was the place to be.
The West, and I got a degree in soil science. I wanted to work outside, help people in some way, and help clean up the environment. And after I finished my graduate degree, I got a job in a basement laboratory very close to here, the USDA. I was working alone, and I was working on instrumentation, and I wasn't working in the field. And I felt like, this isn't really what I signed up for. This isn't meeting my goals. And I thought, well, but I got a graduate degree in it. I spent all that time and money, and I don't want to disappoint my graduate committee that I'm going to do something else, but I think I might do something else.
Yeah, you should just be unhappy with the rest of your life so that you don't have a small disappointment from your graduate community.
Well, luckily, I still see one of my professors that was on my committee on campus. I'm doing something that meets the same goals, but in a completely different way. After a couple years at the USDA, I decided, this isn't really for me. I was always getting in trouble for being on websites looking at surfing and mountain biking and climbing instead of reading scientific documents while I was waiting for my samples to boil. And I thought, well, maybe if this is what I'm really interested in, this is what I need to do. And I started volunteering for the outdoor program on campus, which I hadn't really even known about before when I was in school. And I volunteered for a year, and then they offered me a job at the end of a year. They had been working on creating a full-time position, and I had been telling them, hey, if you ever have a full-time position, please consider me. I'd love to do this as a career. And then I got the job, but I needed to figure out how to do the job.
So what would be involved in doing that job?
All kinds of things, risk management, group dynamics, all kinds of things that I didn't necessarily have the skills for. And I muddled through for a year and tried to make connections and things like that. But I didn't realize that there was a whole network throughout the country and the world of people who professionally have this as a career. You can get a PhD in it. And once I discovered the Association of Outdoor Recreation and Education, I started going to their conferences, and I've been going since 2001. So I've only missed one conference in all of those years. And that really put me in touch with the people who do this professionally and in a professional manner.
So you start out with that backpacking trip, get that separate degree, decide it's not exactly what you thought it was. You find this new path. You join AOR, which is the organization you were just talking about, and then things start to move in a separate direction. We know that you've done some backpacking, but at some point you became highly involved in caving, amongst other activities. Like at this point, right, you work here at UC Riverside in the Outdoor Recreation Department, which means you're introducing people to all variety of outdoor recreation, correct?
Right.
And so at some point you started becoming proficient, or at least knowledgeable in all of those areas, correct? or I mean, I'm sure it's a work in progress, as it is for everyone.
It's all, learning is one of the most fun things in life. So yeah, I'm always learning every day.
So how'd you branch out into caving and all of those other pursuits?
I kind of got into it through climbing. So I started climbing the year that I started volunteering for the outdoor recreation program. I was taught by the guy who was running the program at the time, who was also running the weight room. And he ended up moving into the director position when the director suddenly retired. And with with that experience, I started climbing a bunch. I took AMDA courses, and then later I took PCIA courses, Professional Climbing Instructors Association, and just tried to get myself really knowledgeable in that area. I did have some mishaps along the way.
Who has not?
And who has not? Around 2001, I was climbing at Takits, and it was one of my first, if not my first, multi-pitch trad climb.
All right, you're going to have to say the route, because some people on this show, including myself, are going to be curious what it is, if you can remember it.
It's on the north side, and I'll have to think about what it is and see if it comes to me.
All right, we'll come back to that later.
It may not matter as much because what happened was we got off route.
Okay. So whatever route you were on, you were actually
weren't
on a different route.
Climbing it anymore after a while. So there were all kinds of things that went wrong on this particular adventure. First of all, like I said, it was one of my first multi-pitch experiences, so I wasn't used to having to tie into the end, so I didn't.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah, I can see that would be a problem.
Yep. It was in October, late afternoon, which wasn't the smartest, but I didn't have much experience in multi-pitch climbing, and my climbing partner, who it turns out didn't have that much experience either, thought that we could finish it in time. So he started climbing, and I saw the rope end getting shorter and shorter, and I was yelling up, 20 feet, 10 feet, and then I thought, uh-oh. He's not hearing me. He keeps climbing. He must be getting close to the anchor. So I tied a quick stopper knot in the end. It backed up against my ATC, and he was pulling and pulling, and I was yelling. And I thought, well,
and this is probably a 60-meter rope, 200 feet of rope or so?
Yeah, it was either 150 or 200 feet, something like that. So I thought, well, he must be almost there. I guess I'll just start climbing. I'll climb up a little bit.
Right, and you can't see each other. You can't hear each other.
No communication.
Really. Right.
So I climbed up a little bit. He kept pulling and kept pulling. So I climbed up a little bit more. I climbed up far enough where I could actually tie in properly.
You were essentially simul-climbing without intending to.
Oops.
At this point.
Accidental simul-climbing. That's always fun.
Very wise decision.
Yes. So by the time we finished that pitch, it was actually the first 2 pitches. And on the third pitch, that was the real disaster, where my climbing partner got off route and ended up placing the cam, lowering off of it onto a ledge, walking across a ledge, and then climbing up another crack. And that made the rope go at a really strong diagonal, where when I got to that piece, if I took it out, I would swing.
Right,
and
so he didn't protect the traverse.
He hadn't protected the second. And for him, it wasn't the same traverse because he had lowered off, and that wasn't really an option for me unless we wanted to leave that piece.
Right.
And even then, the rope was going to be clipped into it. So,
right. So for you, not only is it a traverse, it's a down climb.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah, so it's a down climb on what turned out to be that he lowered off of an 11C slab. At sunset in October.
Down soloing
11C, knowing that if I fall, I'm going to hit that ledge and break my femur. Maybe
how far
both
down,
of them.
Like, are we talking a substantial
20
distance?
20
you lowered
feet.
Down? Okay, so it's substantial enough.
Yeah, like something you're not sure you're going to be able to down climb, but you don't really have another
option. You also
option.
want to slide, right?
So the next piece was above a dihedral. So below me was a ledge about 2 feet across, and to the left of me was a dihedral. If I fell down, I would hit the ledge. If I swung sideways, I'd hit the dihedral. And so I was really trying to psych myself up to do these moves, but it was grim.
You really have to start finding better mentors.
Right.
Or at least if you could go back in time and to your childhood, you would say, find better mentors.
Yes, advice to self. So anyway, you're there and you're like, okay, all right, I'm going to do this on 3. Okay, 1, 2, no. Okay, hold on. All right, take a breath. I'm going to, all right, on 3, I'm going to do this.
And you probably still can't see or hear each other at this point.
No,
either, right? Yeah.
No. I think if we yelled, we could hear a little bit. What I had wanted to do was take out the piece and climb up. And he said, no, you can't do that. If you climb above the piece, it's really dangerous. Then you're on lead. And so we were both a little bit confused about what should we do and how to get out of this situation. And neither one of us had a grand amount of experience in this type of climbing.
Hey, at least you were tied to the rope now.
Hey, that's one good thing, right?
Baby steps.
So as it turned out, I psyched myself up and I'm like, yes, I'm going to do this no matter what. Here I go. 1, 2, 3. And I stepped out onto the slab and I could feel my feet slipping and there was nothing to grab onto with my hands. I just yelled, falling, and, slid across the slab, grazing my knees and palms. And I saw the dihedral coming at me, and it was coming fast because it had been a 20-foot fall. And I was like, okay, what body part am I going to sacrifice? Head, hand, foot. Foot.
Were you wearing a helmet?
I was not wearing a helmet.
You're making so many mistakes.
So many mistakes. Yes.
So you definitely don't sacrifice head then.
As you do when you're experimenting without a mentor in the outdoors. So I hit the dihedral and I just sprained everything in my ankle. I think I broke my heel and
sincerely?
Yeah,
Wow.
I broke a bunch of stuff. I think it was a good choice because had I hit my arm with that, I might have had a compound open fracture. So it wasn't open, but now we had to decide what to do. So I'm hanging there.
Yeah, because you're not going to climb any further at this point. Yeah.
Well, that was the discussion. So you could hear dogs howling in the distance, and the breeze was picking up and it was getting dark. And I thought, I do not want to get on the news for this.
It's good to know your head was in the right place. How can I keep from being on the news?
And so we yelled back and forth. I wanted to lower off from there, and he said, no, we can't do that. We're going to have to leave gear, and we won't know where our packs are. When we get to the bottom, we won't know where we're at. Because
Well, it's a good thing his priorities were in line.
And so the decision was made to climb up and then do the walk-off. I don't think either one of us knew how badly I was injured at that point.
But even the descent, the walk-off off the Taquitos, it's tricky.
It's pretty tricky, especially with a broken foot.
Yeah,
so we finished the other 4 pitches in the dark.
And you were probably in agony.
I was
the
in
whole time.
agony. I had a first
aid kit. But hey, at least he didn't lose a $50 cam or an $8 nut.
Unfortunately, the weekend before that, I had taken a group of students on a hike, and I had been telling one of the students, hey, don't jump off the rocks. And he didn't listen and jumped off the rocks and injured his knee a little bit. So I'd given him my ACE wrap and my ibuprofen. And now I didn't have that in my first aid kit.
Because, of course, those things are never replenished as soon as they're used.
I should have.
Yeah, I have a first aid kit I haven't replenished in a year or two.
Yeah, it's good to go through those every once in a while.
It is. This is good advice.
Especially for the 2 most important things you could have in there.
Yeah.
So I didn't have anything to take or to wrap it with. So I suffered through and I did the 4 pitches and we finished at 10 p.m. And then we had to start the walk-off. I just crawled some of it.
I bet it was pretty cold, too, at that point.
It was getting pretty chilly. And I couldn't walk. I had to use a small pine tree as a crutch. And he spent the time coming down telling me about all the other climbing accidents he had been involved with on other outdoor adventures.
I'm guessing you're not going to say this person's name either?
Nope.
But you still climb with this guy all the time?
Nope. I learned a lot, though.
So let's see. You go on a terrible backpacking trip, and you're like, this is for me. I need to do more of these. You go on a terrible multi-pitch climbing experience in the best climbing area in Southern California, by the way.
Classic.
And then you decide, despite breaking things, I need to do this more.
Yeah, so I thought, okay, what do I need to learn from this? I need to have a helmet.
I need to tie into the rope.
Tie into the rope, learn more about multi-pitch climbing.
Pick better partners.
That's a good point, because if you put your trust in somebody whose skills you don't know, you're taking a big risk. And, learn from my mistakes, not your own.
There's a lot of just trusting when you meet people in climbing and other activities that they know what they're doing. There's only so much vetting you can do to a person.
Right. So
a lot of it's just instinct.
So in that case, make sure that you know what to do. And I bought a self-rescue book and I learned all the knots in it. So I just made sure to train myself so that I could trust in my own skills instead of putting all my faith in somebody that I didn't know that well.
And so then from there, you said, all right, I'm going to get better at this and I'm going to climb and I'm not going to go out with this guy anymore. I'm going to go out with other people. And then at some point, you continued along that path and that eventually led you into caving?
Oh, right. We were talking about caving.
We were. But you're free to still talk about climbing more if there are more climbing stories along the way of equal excitement or hopefully lesser.
So when I first started climbing, I got the book Freedom of the Hills.
Right, which everyone buys.
Everyone buys it.
Did
Everyone
you actually
should
read it?
buy it. I did.
Okay,
I did. And I thought...
I skim it.
I thought this is a great book. I am going to do everything in here except ice climbing and aid climbing. And so I'll just skip those chapters. Little did I know that within 1 to 3 years, I would also be doing aid climbing and ice climbing. So free climbing got me into aid climbing.
What made you decide to aid climb, just out of curiosity? Was it because you
something
wanted to
new.
do longer routes or you were sincerely interested in aiding?
I just wanted to learn new skills. Here's another type of climbing that I haven't tried that can get me to places that free climbing can't always get me. What else can I learn, and how else can I try to get to those places? I started climbing with another friend who lived in Texas at the time, and
Where does this friend go on your list of mentor choices?
He's a good mentor.
Okay, good. This is a person whose name you would not be ashamed to share.
Highly skilled. My friend Matt.
All right, we got a name. That means this guy's good.
So he and I started climbing some big walls together, and then he invited me on a caving trip in the Guads, and this was my first technical caving trip, and it was Sentinel Cave, which is a pretty technical cave as far as technical caves go. And it was just the two of us. We brought 600 feet of rope.
Which is a substantial amount of rope.
It was heavy.
A single 600-foot rope
no,
or multiple?
Multiple strands that added up to 600 feet. There was a traverse inside the cave. Because we had multiple strands of rope, there was a knot pass that we had to do on rappel 60 or 80 feet above the deck. And we got to the bottom when we still needed more rope. So he trusted his skills more than I did. He ended up free soloing some stuff at the back to get up into the back of the cave where we wanted to go. That was my introduction to caving. I had done some kind of tour caves and some wild tours and things before that, but that's where I really started getting into exploration, using the skills that I had developed over the years to get to places that I thought were more challenging. And that's how I got into cave exploration and cave expeditions.
Yeah, so we talked about some of these a bit on the Roundtable episode that you were on, but let's talk about those some more here as well. So talk to us about kind of the difference between exploratory cave trips and expedition style caving trips and the similarities as well.
I can tell you a little bit about the Tumlaki expedition that I went on, 2013. It's an area of the Sierra Negra in Mexico that has a lot of potential. Some of the deepest caves in the world have been found there. And so this was an expedition in a cloud forest. Lots of very strong cavers from around the world who had obviously been training very hard. I trained for an hour and a half a day for at least 3 or 4 months, and I felt like I was in one of the best shapes of my life. And I was still the weakest person on the expedition.
It's funny how that works out, right? Like, I remember when I first started getting into different things, I would go out with people that don't do those things, and you feel like you're always way ahead of everybody, and you feel really good about yourself. And then you meet other people who do those activities, and you realize, oh, I got a long way to go. Everybody's in front of me. Everybody's moving faster than me.
And the thing is, a lot of them were from Mexico City, and Mexico City is 7,000 feet in elevation. And so that was base camp of this expedition. And so they were, it was just like a normal day for them, whereas I was feeling the altitude. But it was a very interesting expedition. People would go out in teams and do ridge walking and mark any pits that they saw. And then the next team would come out and drop the pits and see if they went anywhere. So we got there and we took some GPS coordinates and went out. The first pit we dropped was blind. It didn't really go anywhere. The second pit we dropped seemed blind, but then it had a window maybe 20 feet up the side of the wall, and there was a log that had fallen that went up to the window. So on belay, I crawled up the log and flung my leg over, and I had a rock and I threw it, and it just sailed for a while before it hit anything. And I thought, wow, this might be something.
Might be something longer than 600 feet of rope.
Right. And this is a very remote area. It took us 12 hours to get there from Mexico City, but we were taking our time. We stopped along the way to buy food and supplies. The area didn't have any natural water source where the base camp was, and so we had stopped to bring water and get mules. And so anyway, it took us 12 hours to drive there. The last few hours were on dirt roads. Then with the mules and us hiking, it took another 3 hours to hike to base camp. And then from base camp, depending on how much stuff you were taking, it took between 3 and 6 or 7 hours to get to where the caves were. So this is a really remote area and very harsh landscape. Lots of lechuguilla, which is this kind of stabby agave plant.
So it meets all your criteria for enjoyment, which is it's
type 2 fun.
It's difficult and miserable.
Right.
You were ecstatic.
I was pretty happy. And it had that exploration aspect to it. So it was somewhere that we could go where no one has ever been before, which was very exciting to me.
And I assume that everything was being mapped simultaneously, right? Like a part of the point of this expedition was to map.
There were some other people who were mapping it. We weren't mapping. We were sort of the team who were putting in the anchors. So it was Fofo and I, my boyfriend. He would drill the anchors and put in the bolts, and then we'd set the ropes and and I would be the person who would go down into the tight spaces and explore as far as we could. And we would decide together on where the anchors should go and things like that. So we would hike up and bivvy and then spend as much time as we could caving until basically we ran out of either rope or anchors. And then we'd come down and the next team would go up. And whoever was down at base camp would cook for the rest of the group.
To varying degrees of success.
Oh my gosh. There were some disastrous meals. There was one that I remember in particular. It was some sort of yellow slimy sauce that didn't have any flavor to it. And even after 2 days of hardcore hiking and bivvying and scooping water from a black fly infested pit underneath a crawlway in this cave, we came back down hypothermic and starving, and we could barely choke down a bowl full of this stuff.
Almost everything tastes 5 times better when you've really, really earned it. So you have to be a special kind of bad cook to make something so disgusting that people who have killed themselves for days in the middle of nowhere don't want to eat it.
Right. Well, on our day off, I remember we ended up doing a rescue. There was a woman who...
You were just happy to be on the other side of the rescue at this point?
Yes.
Although technically you rescued yourself the other time.
The other time I did a self-rescue. This time we did a goat rescue. So there was a woman who was in the area who was a goat herder, and we would hear little tinkling bells here and there and goats calling to each other. It was really culturally interesting to visit some place like that, besides being in a cloud forest in Mexico at 7,000 to 10,000 feet elevation. But she came by one day and she said, can you help me? My goat has fallen into this hole and he's been in there for 2 days and nobody knows how to get him out. We're throwing branches down to feed him, but we don't know how to get him out and he's going to die in there. And we said, sure, how far is it? And she said, it's just a few minutes down the trail. So an hour later, we get to where the goat is. And the goat's, 20, 25 feet down this pit, kind of scared, it's been in there for a long time. It's probably thirsty. And so we devised a rescue plan that we were going to send a couple people down, tie the goat's legs together and put it in a bag. And then use a haul system. So I built the haul system. Fofo and another guy went down and tied up the goat, and we hauled the goat out of the pit. Then the scariest part of the rescue was the goat was not pleased with all of this. Really, really wanted to either kick somebody or run away. We weren't really sure. But it had horns, and it was a big goat. And
so this wasn't like some little baby goat or something.
This was like a full-sized adult male goat. At least that's the way I remember it. It seemed really big. I wasn't the one about to get kicked in the face, though. So there were a couple of people that very quickly at the same time untied the goat's legs together and then jumped back, and the goat sprang out of action and bounded off into the forest. Hopefully not into another pit, because that area does have a lot of karst geology.
Yeah, and so the next day, you were asked to rescue the goat a second time.
Well, she didn't come and ask us again, so
yeah, hopefully
not.
The goat reappeared.
I hope so.
Well, that's pretty cool. You don't get to do a goat rescue every day.
No.
So how'd the rest of that trip go? More domesticated animal rescues?
It was a tough trip for me.
Bad meals?
I found out maybe 2 weeks before the trip that the official language of the trip was Spanish. And I am not a Spanish speaker. I try. I'm not there yet. So I get to the expedition and everybody's speaking Spanish with each other, and people are sitting around the campfire in the evenings and laughing and telling jokes, and I'm not getting the full translation because some of the jokes aren't
right. Yeah, some
tasteful.
Of the jokes probably, yeah.
That was really hard for me, but it gave me a good perspective of what it's like for other people when they come to the U.S. and we're laughing and talking and they're not getting it all, and what that feels like. So it made me more sensitive.
Yeah, I like that point, because I think that's one of the valuable things people get when they go to a country where they don't speak the language, is then it becomes a little harder to be like, well, why doesn't everybody just learn English?
Right, and speaking louder and slower doesn't really help if you don't know the words.
Yeah. It really does change your ability to communicate depending on how many words you have and what you know about a culture and what you know about the colloquialisms and things like that. Like even just going to different parts of the U.S. where there are different colloquialisms, you can have a similar experience.
Right. We actually work with the International Education Program here at the university to help the students think of other ways that they can communicate what they're trying to tell someone. You can practice in conversation, okay, tell somebody this, but don't use specific words, and then they have to come up with another way to say it. That helps a lot because we do serve a lot of the international population on our outdoor adventures.
There are cool places in other countries other than the U.S. It is true.
So many. We're hoping to get back into international travel at some point. With the university, we visited Costa Rica and New Zealand, and those are pretty easy places to visit. They're used to visitors from the United States. Obviously, in New Zealand, people speak English. So we'd like to start getting back into taking people into other cultures and introducing them to the food and the people and how things are done differently in other places around the world, because I think it gives a really good perspective. And it sort of makes you realize how other countries are pretty similar to each other and how kind and caring people are around the world.
Yeah, I just came back a couple of weeks ago from a trip to Chiapas in southern Mexico. Actually, it's a cave. Have you ever ran Chorrilladero?
Yes.
Cave? Yeah, so we went and did that. And right before we left, there was like a few days before was when it was announced that like 5 states in Mexico were now deemed unsafe to travel to, and everything was like raised to a higher level of alertness. So Chiapas was like number 2 on that list, which means still go, but be wary. We never once felt uncomfortable. I felt safer there than when I got back to LAX in Los Angeles.
Right. I remember one time I went to a trip in Mexico and I came back to Riverside and it was really missing the Mexican food and the culture, and we decided to go to a Mexican restaurant and immediately got food poisoning. We had been fine in Mexico, and it was here that we got sick.
You can be sick anywhere.
That's right.
That's right. Anyone can feed you bad food. So you started to talk about your job a little bit, about going to Costa Rica and New Zealand. Let's talk a little more in depth about that, because a lot of people that are on this show, I'm talking to them about their hobbies, which are the things they do when they're not working. But you are one of those who has found the way to take the things, or these things that a lot of people would do as hobbies that you're very passionate about, and fold it back into your career. So what is it about outdoor activities that you think is important? Why is it worth sharing with college kids and getting college kids into those things?
I think that nature can bring a very strong sense of relaxation. I think that it's a stress reliever. I think that remembering your connection to the real world, the world that's outside of the concrete and glass, it brings a sense of perspective and a sense of calm and understanding. And so just remembering that just because you might do badly on this chemistry test, it's not the end of the world. Are you going to remember this in 5 years? Are you going to remember this feeling that you're stressing out, in the future? Versus, are you going to remember an experience that you had where you made friends with somebody in another country, or you learned how to do an activity that you've enjoyed, for years since then? I think that just remembering that this is an essential part of the human experience is, not to forget where we came from. There are so many cultures that paid attention to the stars, and aligned their whole cities based on the alignment of the stars, or took into consideration the solstice. I think in the modern age, we've forgotten about that and we've distanced ourselves from that. And that's a mistake, I think.
So the building where I parked my car to meet you is called Outdoor Excursions. Is that the name of the company you work for? Is it called Outdoor Excursions, or is it part of a larger group? So
it's the recreation department.
Okay.
There are aquatics programs, learn to swim and water polo, intramurals, and weightlifting and cardio and classes that you can take, and all kinds of things that the students pay for as part of their tuition.
And is that all part of Outdoor Excursions, or is Outdoor Excursions
Outdoor Excursions is a part of the recreation department. So it's something that the students take part in if they want to. It's extracurricular. We try to make it co-curricular so that they're also getting an education in other things. It's not just fun and relaxation. It's on their free time, and it's hopefully extra fun that they have. And that's something that we struggle with, is we know that students don't have a lot of extra money, especially students that are putting themselves through school. And so how can we provide these opportunities to students that don't have as much of a chance to get outside? So we're always looking for grants or subsidization or things like that. We've actually worked with the department to get a 30% discount off of all of our prices. So the department actually subsidizes everything. You pay 70% of what the program actually costs. So we lose a good bit of money each year. Luckily, we're not a business, so we don't have to make money to stay afloat. And we really are happy that the university supports that that type of student development and values what we do as an important part of a student's college experience. We're not only just open to students, though. We have all of our programs that are open to the public as well. So anybody could come on our trips, rent our gear. We have a custom program where we will put together a program for you. If you have a church group or, any sort of organization, a women's club or something, we can put together a trip for you on the dates that you want to with the people that you want on your experience.
And what sort of activities are open to people when they come to Outdoor Excursions?
We do all kinds of things. We have snowboarding is probably one of our most popular ones, and then national park trips. So Yosemite, Joshua Tree, Sequoia. We do surfing and stand-up paddleboarding. Here's one that you may not have heard of, sandboarding.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So not too many programs.
Are you doing that out in Death Valley or elsewhere?
Probably the most popular place that we're doing it right now is out towards Leo Carrillo. There's a big Aeolian sand dune out there that's right across from the Pacific Coast Highway. And you hike up it and wax your board and slide down and, try not to go across the highway. We haven't had anybody come to the edge of it yet.
You can go from sandboarding to highway boarding in a moment's notice.
But it's a good way because people are familiar with snowboarding to do something similar in the summer. And then after that, we go surfing and bodyboarding across the street. That's a popular trip.
What have you seen in students that have come? I'm sure you've seen students come in, go on excursions, and then come back with a different perspective, maybe positive or negative. What sorts of changes have you seen in people who've shown up and gone out on trips with all of you?
We have a wilderness orientation trip. We call it HOOT, the Highlander Outdoor Orientation Trips. And those are designed for people just coming from high school into college so that they can make friends before they get to school. And we've seen them come in, not having any experience in the outdoors and not particularly excited about getting dirty or sleeping next to bugs or any of that stuff. They've never seen stars before. And afterwards, they're really excited about it. Some of them, it's not really their thing. They say, I don't know when the next time is that I'll do this, but I'm really glad that I did it. I'm glad that I tried it and at least got that experience. And some of them go on to become trip leaders in our program and lead the other groups and teach and mentor for the other students. So yeah, we've seen a range of experience levels. Some people come in and they think they're experienced, they're like, yeah, I'm an Eagle Scout, all this stuff. And then they come in and they're like, wow, actually there's a lot more to logistical planning and group dynamics and conflict resolution and all these things that I'm learning that I ever realized. And I'm really glad that I had this experience.
It is funny how much of interaction with other people is a part of everything. And so you can learn to build a fire and put up a tent. But if you don't know how to interact with people or be part of a team, those skills only matter to a very infinitesimal degree in the overall experience.
It's much easier to teach technical skills to somebody with an excited, outgoing, love to learn sort of personality than it is to teach social skills to somebody that's highly technical but isn't that interested in teaching others.
How often do you take people out backpacking, leave them in the middle of the forest with a can of Vienna sausage, see if you can build the same sort of passion that you learned? So
there are different ways of teaching. That was the drop you in the fire method. We try to take them a little bit more gently, but we do have a leader expedition that we teach once or twice a year. Brian's the coordinator with our program, and so he comes out and teaches. We've been going to Santa Cruz Island in the Channel Islands National Park, and we teach the students kayaking and snorkeling and how to lead groups in those activities, map and compass navigation, and sort of some of the more technical skills, how to pack a backpack and things like that, how to set up a tent properly. But then they also are teaching each other. So they're learning teaching skills, they're giving and receiving feedback to each other. They're learning about the stages of group development and how to keep clean in the outdoors. What are the different hygiene elements that you have to take into consideration from kitchen to personal? How do you start a stove without blowing it up, without starting yourself on fire? And so there's a whole host of different things that they're teaching each other, and because they need to learn it well enough to teach it, that really solidifies it for them. And it helps them develop a lot of trust amongst each other to give self-feedback without losing their ego, to admit where they made mistakes and what they would change in order to make it better for next time, and then to listen to other people's feedback and realize that feedback is a gift to them. It's not being condescending and it's not critical. It's, I want to help you grow and learn and make this better each time you do it. We really work on building trust in our groups and team building. The students usually come back from that experience really tight-knit, able to help each other out when they're doing customer service in the shop, and really caring deeply about the program.
I'm sure there are some students who are interested in the program, but they tell themselves, look, I'm really busy. I have to work a lot. I can't make time for this. I can't throw money away on that. Or it'd be great to do it, but because I'm so busy, that's not as important as everything else. What would you tell those students?
We have different options for different people. So we have something called OE Hangouts. So Outdoor Excursions, the acronym is OE. So we're the OE shop, and we have different activities that they can come and do that are shorter in length and free. So we have something called OE Hangouts that we developed this year for community building and for learning, and because they can get free food. So we'll have a campfire in the evening in the parking lot just outside our shop, and we'll teach how to build a primitive fire without matches or lighters, or how to tie knots. And everybody will just bring camp chairs out, and we'll have a fire and roast marshmallows or hot dogs, and we have vegetarian options, and everybody can just kind of hang out and talk and meet the leaders and learn some skills. And it's only an hour long. We try to do it right after class, 5:30 or 6, so people don't have to stay if they're commuting. They don't have to stay really late at night. And it's another option for them to get to know the program. And then we also have a rental program where if they already have the skills or they already have a group of friends that does that sort of thing, they can get the gear. And that's open to the community as well. You don't have to be involved with UCR to rent our gear.
Yeah, you mentioned that. So how would people go about renting gear?
We have a website. You can look and see the types of items that we have there. It's excursions.ucr.edu. In order to rent the gear, you have to come by and pick it up. So you'd have to come to the shop, drive to Riverside, and come over and actually talk to us face to face. But you can reserve the gear over the phone, and we'll have it on hold for you, and then you come and pay for it on the day that you pick it up.
And what sort of gear would that be? Kayaks?
We have everything from kayaks and stand-up paddleboards and big water items like that to crampons and ice axes.
Oh, yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah, snow saws and probes. There's a variety of different things. And then just normal camping gear, sleeping bags, sleeping pads. We have a variety of different tents and sleeping bags for different seasons.
I imagine other universities probably, their recreation centers probably do the same, right?
A lot of them do, yeah. There are well over 500 different programs around the country. Ours may be one of the slightly larger ones, but there are a whole bunch to choose from, and there are some very well-respected programs out there.
Yeah, that's a good point to know, because I think a lot of times someone maybe wants to try a backpacking trip or something, and they think, well, I don't want to buy all that gear, and then maybe they learn they can rent it from some places, but maybe that store is really far away. But if you have a university near you, look and see if the university offers rental gear for those sorts of activities.
That's a great idea, and the prices are very good because we're trying to make it affordable for students.
Right. And you mentioned the website here. What about you? Do you have any places online that you want to send people to so that they can see the sort of things you do, so they can follow your caving trips and your other trips? And I seem to recall you starting an Instagram account or something sometime recently, right?
Yes, I do have Instagram. It's Globe Hopper Jen, and Facebook, Jennifer Hopper. So those are the two main ones that I'm on right now.
And give us the website URL here again as well, please.
Excursions.ucr.edu.
So if you need some crampons and you're in the area, if you're near Riverside, you don't have to buy them.
We also have very affordable scuba classes.
Oh, nice. That's
$485, including all the books and the boat dives and everything. Check that out as well. Here's my little plug for the thing that I've put together over the past 18 years.
Yeah, so you've pointed out just now and earlier that you've been here for 18 years, and so apparently you're very happy that you've put together this scuba program. Are there any other things in the works that you want to tell people about, or something you're hoping to have happen in the future? Or are you keeping that under wraps until it happens?
Well, yeah, I have a few things in the works. They're not fully fleshed out yet. I'm working some angles to provide opportunities for international travel and global learning. So we'll see how that goes in the future. And then I would like to help provide opportunities to get more underserved populations into the outdoors. So whether that's urban youth or for college-age students or people of any age, I'd like to find some grants and create some partnerships to help that happen. And so I have some ideas for that as well. I've been collaborating a little bit with a colleague in the Bureau of Land Management, and there's a California Outdoor Coalition that I'm looking into as well, and maybe getting something like that started here at UCR. Right now, it's pretty active at UC Berkeley, so I have a few things in the works for moving the program forward and providing more opportunities for people.
So are there any final words you want to leave everyone with, or do you have some sort of story of an epic gone wrong that you want to share before we go?
So many epics. I guess the main thing is I really like to collaborate on projects, and so I like turning thoughts and ideas into action. So if anybody has any thoughts and any things that they would like to see, please contact me, whether it's women's programs or bicycle safety or international travel. If you'd like to organize an outreach excursion, a volunteer program for your group where we go out and do a cleanup and then go canyoneering afterwards. And there are so many opportunities that we could talk about. I would also like to hear others' perspectives. We're trying to increase the diversity in the outdoors. It's dominated by white people. And so I would love to hear other perspectives and hear what other groups would like to see us provide. Because as a white person, I have that perspective. I may not be providing all of the opportunities that are out there for what people want to see. And so contact me and let's talk and let's come up with some ideas.
What's the best way for someone to contact you? I would not give out a phone number right now or anything like that.
People can look me up on the UCR staff page, so they can do a search for my name and get my email and my contact information from there.
Okay, so I'll find that staff page and I'll include it as a link.
Great.
All right, well, I promised you I'd shoot for an hour. And we've hit about that now. I didn't expect to get stories of backpacking trips gone wrong and climbing trips gone wrong, so I'm glad we got a couple of those in there. Thanks for meeting me out here on this table that we wiped down.
Thank you.
For our benefit and the future benefit of the other people who would sit here.
There's one clean table now.
That's right. So if you're at our UC Riverside and you want to sit outside the Career Center, look for the table on the right side. That one is clean now, thanks to us.
Oh, thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks a bunch. So just a reminder, student or not, take advantage of that rental program with the Recreation Center at UC Riverside. Or if you are not in that vicinity, check with your local university and see if you can rent gear there. It would be a great way to try out some activities without spending large quantities of money. And before you turn off this podcast, how about heading to our website, gogetoutside.com/podcast. Look for this, episode 65 with Jen Hopper. And there you will find numerous photos of her rescuing goats, rappelling into caves, and various other activities, as well as links to everything we talked about here on the show and some things we didn't get around to. Like I said, we could have dozens of episodes with Jen before we could cover everything she does. So head to our website and check out some of those numerous links we have posted in the show notes. Sometimes we get lonely here at the show, and the only thing that can pick up our spirits is communication with you, the audience, so feel free to send us a message. Go at butcherbirdstudios.com, or if you prefer, leave us a voicemail or send us a text at 818-925-0106. And take a quick moment to run to your podcast purveyor of choice, and please rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And if you would, share it with someone who might like it. This episode of the Go Get Outside podcast was edited by Griffin Davis. It was produced, recorded with additional editing by me, your host, Jason Milligan. And as always, it has been brought to you by Butcherbird Studios. Next time on the show, the infamous tale of the 2014 Swanson Slide Jump Trip Rescue, as told by 2 of its 3 participants. Come back March 16th and hear about one fateful day in one of California's most beloved canyons. See you then.